Welcome and thank you for coming to our special event tonight, the second annual Poems from Life event, a partnership between Juniper Village at Brookline and the Pennsylvania Center for the Book. My name is Katie Kensinger and I work in community relations here at Juniper Village. And I'm serving as the MC for tonight's event in collaboration with Elisa Cahoy, Assistant Director of the Pennsylvania Center for the Book. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the contributions of some people in this room, in addition to the thanks that we have listed in the program. This program grew from an idea shared between me and the Pennsylvania Center for the Book staff, Elisa Cahoy and Nicole Miyashiro. So Elisa and Nicole, I would like to thank you both for everything you've done to make this possible. I'd also like to thank my colleagues here at Juniper. Thank you to our executive directors, Kathy Russell, Liz Plosner-Chalfa, and to our regional director, Ann Campbell, for your support and for giving us the freedom to run with this idea. Thank you also to the Connections directors, Caitlin Hoover, Marianne Ott, and Jill McHenrick, for connecting the residents with the poets. And also, Jill, thank you for all you have done to make this program possible tonight. Also, thank you to Chris Kishbaugh and his team for the wonderful food this evening. Thank you to the residents of Juniper Village at Brookline, Wellspring Memory Care, who created all the art that you will see tonight in the background, as well as the artwork featured in our print materials. And thank you to James McCready for designing all of our print materials this year. And we do have, new this year, chapbooks available when you come in. We didn't want to put the 2018 ones out yet because we want you to be surprised when you hear the poems. But we have the 2017 ones out. We'll put the 2018 ones out. And the residents who have poetry featured, they will be getting a copy, as well as the poets. If anyone else would like a copy, we just ask for a donation, and it will go to the Music and Memory program that we use in our Wellspring and skilled nursing communities. Thank you to Mara Katria and Jeff Unger for recording tonight's program. And most importantly, thank you to each of our poets and to our featured residents and their families for your willingness to dive into this project so enthusiastically, I'll say. And now I'd like to introduce Elisa Cahoy, Assistant Director of the Pennsylvania Center for the Book.
Thank you so much, and thank you to Katie and to everybody here at Juniper Village. I know I speak on behalf of everyone at the Pennsylvania Center for the Book when I say that we treasure you as a project partner, and we are so happy to be involved with Juniper staff and Juniper residents. So thanks for this opportunity. Now, Poems from Life at Juniper Village was initiated last year by Katie Kensinger, Nicole Miyashiro, and me as a collaboration that ties into the Pennsylvania Center for the Book's mission to bring poetry into the daily lives of more people, and it also ties right into Juniper's mission to nurture the spirit of life. And we were so thrilled to begin this collaboration with Juniper Village at Brookline. And as Katie said, we're going to have chapbooks after the event. There's also free poetry posters from the Pennsylvania Center for the Book's Public Poetry Project. Please feel free to take those posters as well, located right outside the door. And thank you to our poets and residents. I just want to echo Katie's thanks. So now, let's get started with the poetry. I would like to introduce our first poet tonight, Abby Miner. Abby facilitates community writing groups that are very similar to our project. In this region, she brings together underheard voices, and she is also the author of Plant Light, Dress Light, a poetry chapbook. Join me in welcoming Abby.
Thank you so much, and thanks again to everyone who was involved in making this collaboration and this evening possible. It's really special, and it's lovely to be here with all of you. It was such a pleasure for me to meet Evelyn Jackson, and one just kind of sweet thing that we had in common that came up in the poem that I just wanted to share with you is that we both are a little bit Jewish and a little bit rural central Pennsylvania. And so that's not such a common combination. So this poem touches on all of that, I think. So thank you, Evelyn, for meeting with me and talking with me. And this poem is called Evelyn's Subjects. Dad lit a candle in a glass, although he didn't go to shul. Mother saved the little pickle jars for Sadie's cellar jellies. Cousin lost a finger when he grabbed a knife I held and never pestered me again. Mezuzah gleamed gold on our door frame, sweet on the door frame, God words. Beloved dog leapt wild in winter, pulled my sled, white dog, white earth, white sky. Curb, cemented with iron, ran all along the street beneath the snow. Salesmen walked away sometimes if the mezuzah caught their eye. Husband taught me up in the country how to shoot in the shadows of the trees. Whitetails stood like statues. I liked the shooting part, but couldn't kill. Ubangi woman, circus woman, wore a ring of beads I drew from memory. Pencil made watches and gum when I worked drawing ads, then later wildflowers on my own. Grandfather loved those little cigarettes, Robert Burns in a wooden box. I'd crawl up beside him on the back porch swing. He'd talk Jewish a bit and give me a puff. I kept those empty boxes for pretty things and stones. Thank you.
And each resident is receiving a framed copy of their poem this evening.
Our next poet tonight is Margie Gaffron. Margie teaches English as a second language to adult students. She founded Milheim's Fourth Friday Poetry Series at the Green Drake Art Gallery. She co-authored with friend Maya Spence the poetry book Holdings, and she has poems in various journals, including The Progressive, Autism Parenting Magazine, and Liminal Age. Let's welcome Margie.
I have a really soft voice, so if you cannot hear me, give me a wave and I'll try to speak more clearly and loudly for you. First off, I will offer an apology. I was at the wrong place at the right time. Now I'm at the right place, but late. I went to Wellsprings. I didn't know there were two different Juniper Villages. So my apologies. Thank you, Abby, for reading first. Thank you, Nicole, for including me in this pretty amazing project. I was so happy to be part of it. And most happy to have met my partner in this project, Claire Kimmel. She's truly an amazing woman. The bio that I received said that she was the person who cared about everybody and took care of everybody, and I can see that. But also, what I learned as I got to spend some time with her, you would think she's just a sweet old lady, you know, as many of us are sweet old ladies, until you get under this surface, and then you find other things. Yeah. So she is very insightful, articulate, intelligent. And so, Claire, thank you so much for sharing with me. So this poem is called Notes from Mother, and it's for Claire Kimmel. Outside her window, the sun is warming the roses. We agree. We can smell them through the glass. And Claire begins to speak. I'm so glad you asked me about my mother. My mother writes me notes. When I got up this morning, there was a note here, you see, in this dish. It's a pretty dish, isn't it? She left it here with my rosary. Her notes are always in Polish. I think she might be lonely. We were very close when I was young, my mother and I. My daughter, Claire Ann, she's a good daughter. We are close like that too. I was born in Mount Carmel, and when I was old enough, my mother would send me to the shops. She would say, "Claire, would you go to the store for me? Maybe there would be a penny for me to spend at the grocery." I didn't need a note, you know. I could remember. I would go to the grocery, maybe to the butcher shop, and you know, the butcher knew her. He knew all the women in the neighborhood. He knew what to give me, what would please my mother when I asked for a certain cut of meat. I would ask Mother. Her name was Veronica. Oh, she was an excellent cook and pie baker. I would say, "Mother, what are you going to make?" She would smile. "I'm going to make something different, something I am hungry for. When it's made, I will give you some." Sometimes women do things they do not want to do. But sometimes they do exactly what they want. I've been thinking about this for a long time. I was able to do many things I wanted to do. Taking care of people. I wanted to do that. It is important to take care of people. There was a man in this room the first day I came here. He was so kind to me. I like to give him fruit when I go out, if I see him. He's always very kind and caring. But I don't know his real name. So I call him Jesus Christ because that is who he really is, who we are all meant to be. Jesus Christ. We are meant to care for each other. When I find the note from Mother, I will show you. Her notes are always in Polish. They say, "Bardzo ci kocham." Claire, I love you very much.
Accepting the copy of Claire's poem is Claire Ann, Claire's daughter.
Thank you so much, Margie. Thank you, Claire. Steve Deutsch is our next poet tonight. Steve is a semi-retired practitioner of the fluid mechanics of mechanical hearts and heart valves. And he blogs, writes poetry, and short fiction. His most recent work appears in Eclectica magazine, the Ekphrastic Review, New Verse News, The Drabble, and Misfit magazine. Let's welcome Steve Deutsch.
If I start coughing, it's okay. That's what I do. When we went for the interview, my wife Karen went along to interview Angelina because interviewing is one of the things she does well. You want to stand up and take a bow? I didn't think so. So there we were, the three ex-New Yorkers and a New York story. Doesn't get much better than that. It was great fun. Angelina is of my parents' generation, and although her story is very different than theirs and very interesting in its own right, What struck me was the common arc. My parents and most of my family went to Florida from the New York area in the late 60s and early 70s. Some, like my mother-in-law and Angelina, have returned to live here once again so they could be near family. Here, with much license, I talk about her childhood. Manhattan childhood. Today, we say Manhattan and think glass and steel totems vying for the top of the sky. We see the wealthy and specialty shops that satisfy every whim. Shoes made of llama's breath, lunch of cockapoo tongues sauteed in gold ingot oil. We watch as gentry parade their young in custom perambulators or walk miniature dogs they've dressed for a night at the opera. But we were once a place of neighborhoods, of family and friends. Our enclaves bore exquisite names, some, like Harlem, relics from the days of the Dutch. I lived in Hell's Kitchen, named, it's said, by Dutch Fred the Cop, who found Hell's climate mild by comparison to the goings-on in the tenements on 39th and 10th. My friends and I grew to maturity in sixth-floor walk-ups, where those of modest means could say with pride, "We're doing just fine, thank you." The kitchen filled with aunts and uncles, 3 deep, my dad would murmur. A mixture of the wisdom of years and the gossip of the day, dispensed amidst the aroma of strong coffee and the morning's brioche. I waitressed at 12 at a cousin's restaurant, a tiny place in the garment district that served minestrone to working men. I summoned upstate at a camp subsidized by kindness, girls' hair, boys way over there. I learned to stitch and sew in Central High. It served me well at Altman's and New York fashion houses. The world changes as easily as it revolves around the sun. We joined the Great Migration south and watched in awe as time depleted us. I've made the march back north, happy to be surrounded once again by family.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Angelina. What a portrait of Manhattan past. It's changed so much. Our next poet, Elisa Mangini, teaches English at Penn State. She serves as the founding and managing editor of Paper Nautilus Press. Elisa is the author of 5 collections of poetry and prose. Her most recent release, Ambivalent Nymph, is a poetry chapbook that explores the etymology associated with weddings through a poetic and narrative lens. And now, here is Elisa.
It is such a pleasure to be here. I had so much fun talking with Natalie. One of the things that drew me to her was that in the first line of her bio that we received is that she was born in a zoo. And I thought, this is a woman who has some incredible stories to tell. And so, in addition to that, she also grew up in New Hampshire, and I grew up in Connecticut, and so we shared some New England roots there as well. And through our time talking together, there were so many things that I learned about her incredible life, and it was so hard to try to bring all of that together in just one poem. And so here, I try to capture some of that through scenery and setting and thinking about how the seasons play into all of our lives. What winter can bring. I was born in the February dark, surrounded by snow, ushered in by my parents' gentle hands. The leopard's cage nearby, the roads impossible with slush to drive, unplowed from the zoo we tended to the hospital. My father's hands would grip the reins of the worn harness, steering 6 strong huskies, their wild eyes like blue flares in the dusk, as I held tight to everything. My father, food supplies for lions and chimpanzees, the sled itself zooming through the snow. I knew to cling, that things were fragile and could be swept away, like when the hurricane of '38 hit New Hampshire hard. more than half our cages blown apart, a slew of birds, some snakes, even a bear cub lost in the devastation. One of my only dolls disappeared in the wreckage, my animal companions gone. Later, I learned brutal weather could bring good too. I'd ski the white mountains of my home, etching twin rails of snow, gliding faster than a team of dogs or winds that circle off coast, and at 23, found my love at the bottom of the slope, ready to weather each season's fury, to travel the world, to someday raise 3 girls together. But first, kindling our warmth at the base of that mountain, hand in hand, surrounded by snow.
Peter Buckland is a writer, a teacher, a researcher, and an elected official right here in Ferguson Township. His first book of poetry, Heartwood, considers what it means to be human in the Anthropocene, the age of humans. Peter also works at Penn State's Sustainability Institute, and as I said, if you live in Ferguson Township, he is your supervisor. Let's welcome Peter Buckland.
Unlike Margie, I'm very loud. I want to just thank everybody for being here. This is just a really, really wonderful event. I think in today's world, it's so just lovely to see people honoring and dignifying each other so much and getting in touch with our legacy. And I was really honored to spend the better part of an afternoon with Ernie Bergman, who I believe is not here this evening. So, like Ernie, I am a township supervisor. Ernie was a Ferguson Township supervisor. I had absolutely no idea before this, and so when we sat down, we were talking about the cast of characters of Ferguson Township and its history of the last 40 years, and so that was really nice. I think that one of the things that struck me about him, besides his incredible accomplishments, and wondering if he ever slept when he worked, because he accomplished so many things, was the power of his story as a refugee, his story as an immigrant to this country fleeing Nazi-occupied Europe. And these days, when there is so much animosity toward refugees, and the rise of sort of reemergence of white supremacists, the power of this man and his story was just incredibly touching to me, and I'm getting very emotional talking about it. But the time that I got to spend with him was really very meaningful to me, and I hope that it comes through in the poem that I wrote for him, A Man Who Came Home. Deutschland called. In 39, their Vaterland called its men to reign. Bergman, he was called. Israel Bergman, he was called. The paper said he must hear the call and come home and enlist. He sent the paper back to Bern. Ernest Leopold Israel Bergman, he was called. The paper came back from the bastards. The paper labeled him stateless, labeled him a refugee, a Jew, Israel. His father died when he was 3, his brother 3 months. He was a man with no Vater and no Vaterland. You, Israel, will become like Mahler, homeless and stateless, a Jew throughout the world, consigned to wander as a man without a country. But his home, he knew, was in soils across the sea and past the war, past Basel, Luxembourg, Belgium, France. How can I get past? How much does it cost? Money in hand. No, no, monsieur. Visa stamped. Past Holland to New York, soon to become a man who was called home. Thank you.
Accepting for Ernie this evening is Jill McHenrick, our Connections Director.
What a journey. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Ernie. Our next poet tonight is Michael Martin Garrett. Michael is a writer, a poet, a musician, a former journalist, and political operative. His poetry has appeared in Penn State's Calliope Literary Magazine. He has multiple poetry and prose pieces pending publication. Let's welcome Michael.
Hey everybody, I'm really thrilled to be here, and I was equally thrilled to be invited to be a part of this project. I was really drawn to Finch because I think I saw a lot of myself in her. She's a writer, she's a rebel, and she has what Iggy Pop might call a lust for life. And one of her stories that she told me, I think, really encapsulated this very well, which I, in turn, tried to capture in the poem that I wrote. And in true millennial fashion, I'm reading off my phone. Thank you. Landing the plane. She screamed through the azure sky, tearing through fall streaks and clouds, the trappings of domestic expectation gravity-bound to the distant ground. Divorce simply wasn't done in those days, never mind a husband's womanizing ways. A woman's worth was to her man, and so, despite her aching, she had stayed. Her husband, the part-time pilot, demanded his wife learn to fly, but had failed to realize the freedom she would find in the boundlessness of the wild and unfettered sky. Something changed in her that day, slipping the bonds of earth on aluminum wings, conviction rising like the wind that a woman's life was worth more than a tarnished wedding ring. So when she alighted back on the ground, returning wheels to runway without a hitch, she smiled to herself. If I can land the plane, I can divorce the son of a bitch.
Thank you, Finch. Thank you, Michael. Poetry with an impact, right? Next up, Camille Yvette Welsh. Camille Yvette is the author of Full, a chapbook from Dancing Girl Press. She acts as reviews editor for Literary Mama, and she teaches at Penn State. Her manuscript, The Four Ugliest Children in Christendom, was a finalist for the Washington Prize, and her work has been nominated for both a Pushcart Prize and the Best of the Net anthology. Here's Camille Yvette.
I just want to say thank you, and like everyone, I'm thrilled to be here. I have to laugh because this is my second year doing it, and I feel like I badgered Nicole. I'm so thrilled. If you want me to do it again, I can do it again. If you want me to do it again. So I'm happy that you took me up on it. So I worked with Alice, and I believe this is one of Alice's, this is one of Alice's pieces. So I knew about 15 years ago, I was working for the CDT as a freelance writer, and I covered like the local art scene. And at the time, Alice had a collage show. And so I had met her and interviewed her before for her collage show. And so when her name came up again, I recognized it, and I remember her collage was sort of snarky and feminist and funny, also beautiful, this really lovely layering of both ideas and materials. And so when we got to work together, a lot of Alice's conversation is like that too. It's a little bit personal narrative. It's a lot of, have you read this book? And what do you think of this author? And have you seen this painting? And so for me, in talking with Alice, it was kind of this crash course of arts in the 20th century, which was wonderful. And so in writing the poem and working with Alice, I tried to kind of honor the idea of collage. And so there's Marianne Moore's in here, and you'll hear some James Joyce, and you'll hear a few other people you may recognize. And you'll also hear a conversation we had about Proust, a little snippet of it. So this is Portrait of the Artist as an Old Woman for Alice Riddy. And here you are again, the smartest girl in the class, the jewel in the paper crown, voices of books still ringing in your head. Omissions are not accidents. You, artist and technician of fragment, foot, mouth, eye, you speak to some whole, but only whisper of totality. I know what this is, remnant. Fragment as fetish, as focus, your lost world, this room, these slanting spines, unframed photos, burble of jazz. You might have cut yourself out, the Syrian queen bobbing in her shuttersome circle. I began, and a heap of chaos, and now this compressed scene. 8 by 10 feet, inches. Shall I declaim, you ask? Shall I declaim this poem? Another self in your throat, broad collage of theater and listener, language and sigh, your hand raised to the imagined other. You and Ashbury are talking. Paint it into blooms, slice it from the page, paste it onto the foam board, declaim it. Have you read Disorder and Light? Proust? Yes. Remembrance of, no. In Search of Lost Time, if you please. Imagine the brain as riverbed, as tributary, the red dust of clay, the sudden shot, a synapse firing, electric stream running, pulsing again at 50, then 83. First color, Danube blue, then the pure pleasure of intellect, that darting bird. I learned to see things from a distance. Valhalla, the circles of hell, the gold of heaven, those familiar songs, and your curiosity, always there, like knowing.
If you were listening to WPSU yesterday, actually, they did a story and they featured Camille Yvette and Alice in their story. So a little bit of that poem was on the air too. Oh yeah, and it is available online as well on the WPSU website if you want to listen to it. Our next poet tonight is Joe Beuter. His poetry has appeared in the Southern Humanities Review, Vassar Review, Confrontation, Nashville Review, Poet Lore, Cave Wall. Wow, this is a big list. Tar River Poetry, and elsewhere. He has also been a participant in the Washington, D.C. Joaquin Miller Cabin Poetry Series and has been a resident at the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts. Joe Beuter.
Hello. Taller than it's great to be here. It was great meeting Bill. I enjoyed my talk with him very much and found that we also had a lot in common. Things that were distracting us from what could go in a poem. Things like Penn State football. But one of the really interesting things about the conversation with Bill was thinking about his time working for a railroad company and thinking about transportation in an earlier time. And it made me think about this game I would play with my grandparents called River Roads and Rails. Has anyone ever heard of that game, River Roads and Rails? Really simple game. You had pieces, square sheet pieces that were either had a river, a road, or a rail on it. And you needed to connect these pieces together. Some pieces had dead ends, and some pieces had sort of throughways. And we can't do that anymore, right? There's so many different ways of thinking about transportation. There's loop systems and automated cars. So it's sometimes good to think about the simplicity of the way we used to travel and the way that our goods used to travel. So it was nice to have that kind of conversation with Bill, and it was great to meet him and hear his story. Interlocking. Out west of Harrisburg, Bill watched the pusher crew take a Penn Central train over a mountain grade with the ant power that confounds what you can see with your own eyes. The train came tracing the Susquehanna and Juniata rivers, a beautiful stretch of rail, but not just because of the landscape, which is striking, but beautiful for the work of engineering and men hauling goods when men and their families moved in mass by cars and planes over these green counties, whose byword was over, always over land, over river, overcome the land and the mercurial-hearted economy. To Bill, though, the land was territory with operations to be tracked east and west before the goods went to some other territory. Bill watched the tracks unfold their steel and oak from the glass-backed train car, a task that would dizzy those untenured in blocking the trick of perception, where those cold fissures by the Capitol's gray bridges and those rust-fierce cars on Route 322 appear to be sucked away behind a still train that's actually moving forward. Bill will tell you there's nothing preternatural about what he knows. What he knows from when a board operator invited him up to an interlocking tower in Cleveland to let him call in the charging gray of trains when the way was safe. From when he talked to the company president about hauling goods after leisure travel shifted to a more godlike myth of air. From when he was in Delphos, Ohio, to propose to his wife, and she said, "I was waiting," like a train holding steady before the switch. Thank you, Bill.
And accepting Bill's poem this evening is Liz Plasner-Chalfa from Wellspring Memory Care.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Joe. I have the unfortunate news that I am now introducing our final poet for the evening. Can't believe that. Our final poet is Lee Peterson. Lee directs the Writing Center at Penn State University's Altoona campus, where she teaches in the English and Women's Gender and Sexuality Department. She is currently a guest instructor in Penn State's BA/MA program in creative writing, and her latest collection, The Book of E, The Great Crossing, focuses on the experience of mothering a girl in a world of possibility and instability. Our final poet, Lee Peterson.
Good evening, everyone. I love the art, I have to say. I've been really enjoying all the images, visual images behind us. So, as we round up the night, I guess I should say a final thank you to everyone who made all of this lovely poetry possible. So like some of the other stories that you heard, I was drawn, we're offered these descriptions of the residents and can sort of pitch for different people, seeing who we feel like maybe there's a connection to. And I asked to be paired with Miriam Myers, who was born in Ithaca, New York, like I was. And my sister's name is also Miriam, so these things made me want to talk to this lady. And there were things about her, obviously, that were compelling, and she seemed like an interesting person. And we only met one time, and I would say all of that bore out. And there were many interesting elements to her story and her life. But the thing that I ended up writing about was focused on love. One of the things that I came away from our conversation with was a feeling of the strength of her love for her husband, for her house, for books, for a time she got to travel west as a child and see in real life some of the things she'd read about. And she was also someone who had gone to church, and so I pulled into the poem pieces of the Song of Solomon, which is all about love from the Bible, and called the poem Song for Miriam. So hopefully you can hear the difference in the language. I can't imagine that you can't, where it's pieces of the Song of Solomon, and it opens with a quote from it, and where it's me telling her beautiful story. Song for Miriam. Set me as a seal upon thine heart, as a seal upon thine arm, for love is strong as death. King Solomon, from Song of Solomon. In Ithaca, in youth, a girl, I climbed trees, played football with the boys, ivory towers and oaks in rows, uphill still, further off yet. I raised thee up under the apple tree. There thy mother brought thee forth. There she brought thee forth that bare thee. My sisters older and gone, I kept from loneliness in books, mysteries, westerns, great expanses, prairies, horses, wide breadth of space in words. My beloved spake and said unto me, rise up, my love, my fair one, and come away. We took the bus those 3,000 miles, left Cayuga Lake behind. I recognized antelope across the plains like no other leaping, from all those pages turned alone. I saw a new desert night through the glass, saw the Rockies' cathedral spires. Still over all those miles and anxious years, blackouts and air raid wardens, we came home from San Francisco to Ithaca to school. I met him then, my first week at Cornell, in the dorms, Charles. He brought me to the banquet house, and his banner over me was love. We rung in year one married, baby Lee in hand. We welcomed them one, by two, by three, by four, by five in the end. I told my girls they could do anything they set their minds to. Now they live on the earth, all my sons and daughters, hinge a life to then, to now, to what will come, and all their own children growing and under the sun. The beams of our house are cedar, and our rafters of fir. Turn right towards Lewistown and right again, a long drive. I raised the children in that house, a host of hounds to keep us safe in the woods, the land, the fire, the records I played, mornings, alone, big band hymns. I was so in love with my house. One spring I planted those 500 bulbs, and my back was never the same. And him, 63 years, my best friend. We built a life, the animal hospital, the house. We traveled after the children, took in the world. My beloved is gone down into his garden, to the beds of spices, to feed in the gardens and to gather lilies. Out the window I see all my pretty yellow leaves are almost gone, and I hear his song. As the apple tree among the trees of the wood, so is my beloved among the suns. So I will climb again, climb to him, and sing. Thank you.
Wow. I am just overwhelmed by the humanity, the love, and the creativity in this room tonight. Thank you again to every one of our poets, to our very special residents, and to our team here at Juniper Village at Brookline for making this all possible. Thank you to the Pennsylvania Center for the Book, and especially Nicole Miyashiro and Elisa Cahoy. Before we end this evening, we do have the chapbooks available, as well as the public poetry posters. Please feel free to take 1 or 2 or 3. And thank you again, everyone, for coming this evening.